U.S. attorneys in Oregon may never, listen to this, prosecute those charged with the destruction. Is that really justice? Meanwhile, more and more states are taking a stand by passing legislation to protect those most vulnerable, the unborn children. Joining us in a few minutes is one state legislator leading the fight for life, Texas State Representative Phil King. And President Biden raises the cap for the number of refugees that can enter the United States. When is enough enough? A little later, Victory News contributor John Graves joins us, and we're going to find out. Right now, let's go to Mike Garofalo with tonight's top stories. Mike?
Well, after more than a year of unrest and destruction in Portland, Oregon, the people responsible will likely not face any consequences. Since May of last year, shortly after protests began in the city, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oregon has filed federal charges against 97 people. Of those 97, 58 of those cases have either been dismissed or are on the track for dismissal. Thus far, only one person has had to face any real jail time. Of the 31 deferred resolution agreements, 19 were people charged with felonies, and most were alleged assaults on federal officers who were sent there to protect the courthouse and other federal buildings. Greg, back to you.
Thanks, Mike. I want to bring in attorney and Victory News contributor John Graves. John, I was trying to follow the president's math in that as billions and carry the one, and I was trying to follow that. And I just realized what we need to do is do a McDonald's sign that says billions served and just not worry about it anymore. All right. Let's pivot to this going on the Pacific Northwest. We have a two-tiered justice system, it appears. We didn't condone what happened in Washington, D.C., but we saw what happened in Washington when people stormed the Capitol building. There are people still sitting in jail. There's still a fence around the Capitol, and those people are getting prosecuted, but in the Pacific Northwest, not so much. Your thought?
It's a stunning show of hypocrisy, and it's on so many levels. The outrage of the radical left or the political left against those who just went to hear a speech. I have family members that were visited by FBI agents because they were just present at the speech, didn't set foot at the Capitol, in the Capitol, or close to the Capitol. And yet you've got people who are rioting, burning down buildings, and now they're immune from that. That even happened, if you'll remember, last week in 2016, the inauguration of President Trump. They burned cars down. Those people are also not just getting immunity, they're getting the settlement of a lawsuit because anybody dared to prosecute them. And yet you've got Rudy Giuliani, an unconstitutional search and seizure to spread fear of anybody who's on the other side of the political left. And it's so rampant, it's almost people don't even know how to recognize it anymore.
Yeah, well said, John. The 2020 election audit taking place in Maricopa County, Arizona, has no date certain as to when it will end. In fact, the audit's liaison said on Monday there is no deadline. Former Arizona Secretary of State Ken Bennett told the Epoch Times the goal is accuracy and completeness, not speed. Senate Republicans booked the Arizona Veterans Memorial Coliseum until May 14th with the hope that the audit would be done by then. An analysis of the equipment used in the election was completed over the weekend, but the reviewing of the 2.1 million ballots is more time-consuming process. The state Senate ordered the audit to ensure the integrity of the vote. Democrats have unsuccessfully tried to stop it. Greg?
So far in 2021, the states are leading the charge when it comes to protecting the lives of unborn children from abortion. State legislatures across the country are on pace to approve a record amount of bills that place limits on abortion. In 2021 alone, there have been 61 bills in various states that restrict access to abortions, putting the legislative session on track to beat the record set back in 2011. According to the reports, 536 bills restricting abortion have been introduced in 46 states, including 146 bills banning abortion after a certain point in pregnancy. Another positive outcome of 2021 has been cities like Lubbock, Texas, whose citizens voted to outlaw abortion in their city, effectively becoming the fourth city to declare themselves a pro-life sanctuary. In Texas, the Senate here passed the Texas Heartbeat Act last week. The House version of HB 1515 is expected to come up for a vote as early as tomorrow. SB 8 would ban abortions after a heartbeat is detected in the womb. Other states have passed similar measures, including Louisiana Ohio, and Utah. In a moment here, I want to bring in Representative Phil King. I have a breaking news update concerning racial comments that were made by a Texas leader here concerning Senator Tim Scott. Almost a week after referring to South Carolina Senator Tim Scott as an Oreo, a racially charged term, the Lamar County Democratic Party chair has now resigned. Gary O'Connor made the comment after the African-American senator gave the Republican rebuttal to Joe Biden's speech last Wednesday to a joint session of Congress. Shortly after O'Connor's comments, Texas Governor Greg Abbott came out and said he wanted to see O'Connor apologize and resign. Well, today, the Democratic Party chair did just that. He decided to call it quits. Let me bring in Texas Representative King. That's good news. I've not seen too many of those that would actually resign for doing something like that, but that's a good thing. Welcome, sir. How are you?
Good, very good. Still haven't seen an apology, I don't think, but resignation's good.
That's a good thing. All right, let's go to the heartbeat bill and what's happening. Give me the update on all of those, and I believe there's an abortion trigger bill in the legislature. Give us the details.
Yeah, let me tell you, tomorrow is probably the most, not probably, it absolutely is the most pro-life day in Texas legislative history. Tomorrow in the Texas House, we will have both the trigger bill, which says that to the extent that the Supreme Court begins to draw back or completely gets rid of Roe v. Wade without any further legislative action, Texas will automatically jump to that new greater restriction. So if Roe v. Wade goes away, abortion is completely illegal in Texas. If it's a lesser part, we go to whatever that is without the legislature having to do anything. That's the trigger bill. The other one is the heartbeat bill, which says that no abortion can be conducted in Texas from the moment of a heartbeat forward. So tomorrow should be the biggest legislative day on pro-life in Texas history. Heartbeat bill's already passed the Senate. We'll pass it and the trigger bill out of the House tomorrow, and then the trigger bill will go back to the Senate, and hopefully by the end of May, they'll both be law in Texas.
Wow, that's great news to hear. There's so many people who have been praying for this. And I think it's interesting, sir, that there's so many states across the country, and even Lubbock, Texas, the citizens voted they didn't want to have abortion. There's a move on, is there not?
Yeah, and I think part of it is we're all encouraged because we think, we could have passed a bill anytime that said, hey, abortion's illegal. And we knew that the courts would immediately strike that down. So we've been wanting to do things that actually will save babies' lives. Now we're hoping with a new Supreme Court, we're hoping they're going to come through and we can go farther than we've ever gone before. And I think that's why you're seeing this in so many states across the country. Is we think we've got a chance of passing these strong pro-life, right thing measures and seeing those stand up all the way through the Supreme Court for the first time.
Yeah, and I believe that that's exactly the motivation of it. I want to applaud you, sir, and thank you for doing that. When we come back in a moment, I want to talk to you about another bill you're passing that has to do with investment, pensions and investment. Mike, back to you.
Greg, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki today during a press briefing took a bit of a swipe at former President Donald Trump and his policies at the border. Let's take a listen.
I wanted to provide a brief update on the situation at our southern border. After 4 years of an immigration system rooted in destructive and chaotic policies, President Biden is taking the challenge head on.
In case you didn't hear that exactly, let me repeat that. After 4 years of an immigration system rooted in destruction and chaotic policies, Biden is taking the challenge head on. Not quite sure Jen Psaki is aware of the crisis at the border that most experts would agree began after Joe Biden essentially invited illegals to head for the U.S. border. Well, several mainstream media outlets are under fire after having to post redactions over false reporting of so-called facts involving former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani. The Washington Post, New York Times, and NBC News are facing widespread criticism after having to post corrections concerning their false reporting that Rudy Giuliani was warned by the FBI that he was a target of a Russian disinformation campaign. The stories about the warning were published following the raid on Rudy Giuliani's home, which came as part of an ongoing investigation into whether or not he violated the law while lobbying on behalf of Ukrainian officials back in 2019. Each of the outlets referred to anonymous sources when publishing the story, which prompted Giuliani to demand they reveal who their sources were following those retractions. The three outlets were quickly called out also on social media for the inaccurate reporting, with some calling for an end to the use of anonymous sources in journalism. Well, President Biden and his team have enjoyed a fairly successful first 100 days in office if you are a Democrat, but a lack of bipartisanship could be his undoing. After repeated calls for unity and bipartisanship in Washington during his campaign, Joe Biden's response while in office has been less than impressive, and his hardline approach toward negotiating with Republicans on the coronavirus spending bill has cost him considerable goodwill. Biden's team says the president is operating from a new definition of bipartisanship, one that gives more weight to the concerns of Republican voters than to the elected GOP officials in Washington. Greg, back to you.
Thanks, Mike. I want to bring in Representative King again. Let's talk about this next bill that you've gotten passed. It is a bill preventing Texas from investing state pensions and school funds in companies and investment firms that boycott Texas energy. Tell us about that, why that's so important.
Well, of course, oil and gas is 30% of the state budget, and Texas energy industry is the hope of America for true energy independence. And we started hearing from our companies, small and medium large, that they were having difficulty getting access to capital, which hasn't been a problem in the past. And it was because these large funds, the investment banks, were making not fiduciary decisions in lending and in investment, but they were making political decisions. And so we looked, and we invest about $500 billion a year of our pension funds and other investment funds in different investments. And so we just made a decision. We've passed it out of the Senate and as of today, the House, that says, look, you can do whatever you want, but Texas is not going to buy stock in any investment company, in any investment fund that is boycotting oil and gas companies. And more than that, Texas will not allow any government entity in the state, local, state, county, to enter into a contract with any company that is boycotting our oil and gas industry. It's a tremendous step. When you take $500 billion out of the economy out of the investment opportunities in one single act, it's a big deal and sends a strong message.
It does send a strong message, and we always appreciate when you guys do things like that in the legislature. Let me ask you real quickly, sir. You have been in the Texas House for quite some time. In fact, you were in the Texas House when President Trump was in office. Would you characterize his immigration system as rooted in destructive and chaotic policies?
Let me tell you, what's going on today wasn't going on a year ago. And what is going on today was almost going on as bad during the Obama administration. When Trump came in, it changed everything. And let me tell you also, we talk about 1,000 people a day coming across the Rio Grande Valley. 2 to 3 times that many are not apprehended. So when you hear that 172,000 or whatever were apprehended in April, double or triple that number. That's the numbers that are actually coming in. And it's horrible. People are forced into indentured servitude, human trafficking. The drugs are coming in such larger numbers because the police and the Border Patrol are all focused on immigrants that they can't do drug dealing. I can tell you in my district, the price of Mexican methamphetamine has gone down 50% over the last couple of years, simply because of supply and demand, because there's so much of it out there. And it's coming right across that Rio Grande Valley. Wow,
210,000 apprehensions was our last count through April as we've been down there on the border.
We'll double the triple that.
Yeah, and you can more than double that. Yeah, right. All right, I want to bring John Graves in here. John, I guess it's good to know that President Biden now is going to handle this catastrophe head on the border.
I don't know if he's going to handle it head on, but I agree with Representative Phil King. He couldn't have said it much better. And let me put that in perspective. When he says 2 to 3 times the number of people, that's 400 to 600,000 people up to 68% of the women and children report being sexually molested or raped on the way up here to that. It is a tragedy on drugs, on sex trade, on poverty, on illegal behavior. It is out of control, and people don't understand it's a humanitarian crisis. It's beyond even a political crisis. I like the way Phil King just said. We need to stop making political decisions, start making fiduciary decisions. We need in this country to stop making political decisions and start making spiritual decisions for people. It's a tragedy at the border.
We had Nigel Farage on this morning, and he was instrumental in getting Brexit done there in England. And he made the comment that immigration into England, that was the seminal thing that made that happen in Brexit. I will submit to you, we can't ignore what's happening on the border to restore America. So true. Tim?
Well, a school nurse in New Jersey faces an uncertain future after being suspended for suggesting that students shouldn't be forced to wear masks. Erin Pine, who has worked for the Stafford Township School District for 3 years, decided to voice her concerns when students started to visit her for anxiety related to wearing a mask. Those experiences spurred action for Pine, who decided to protest the mask mandate herself and let her school know that she would no longer be wearing a mask in the building. Those actions led to Miss Pine being escorted off the campus and a suspension from her job. In New Jersey, the State Department of Education requires students to wear masks at all times at school, with exceptions for those with certain medical conditions or when they are eating or drinking.
Case law led to the Supreme Court decision not to hear a suit against the government filed by a former West Point cadet who says she was sexually assaulted while a student at the military academy. The suit alleges the academy failed to provide her with appropriate support. Now, the incident in question happened back in 2010 when the cadet was a sophomore and took a late-night walk with a fellow cadet. The woman left the academy 3 months later. Lower courts cited a 1950 Supreme Court decision, Ferris versus the United States, in dismissing her case. On Monday, the Supreme Court did the same thing. However, in a dissenting opinion, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote this: "The High Court should have heard the case," he said. Thomas added that the 71-year-old case was wrongly decided, in his opinion, of course. Far-leaning liberals are pushing the Biden administration to alter the term limit rules for the Supreme Court. The Biden administration has announced that an exploration committee has been assembled to study the impact of a Supreme Court makeover, including the idea of term limits for the country's high court. Term limits or mandatory retirement ages for Supreme Court justices would represent a path of less resistance for the left, especially when compared with more radical proposals such as packing the court. And conservatives worry that rotating justices could further polarize the confirmation process. Greg, back to you.
Yeah, let's just stay with the Constitution. Representative King, let's bring you in here, sir. I want to thank you for what you're doing with the heartbeat bill. All of this happens tomorrow here in the state of Texas. Is that correct?
It is. Tomorrow's the day.
Okay, so we'll be in prayer for that, and we encourage you, all of you in the audience, to do so as well. Please. I would like to encourage you on this, sir. I would love to see Texas get a law like Florida just passed that allows people who've been canceled by social media to sue social media for that. If you could get to work on that one, that's my little request. We've
got it in the work. I think you'll see something pass before the end of May.
There we go. I love it. John Graves, I want to bring you in here. The whole mask thing and all the things that we're hearing. We saw pictures earlier of President Biden and his wife meeting with former President Carter in the home, no mask on. They walked out in front of the cameras, and there's the mask back on them. This has become theater, has it not, John?
It really is, and it's a double standard that they kind of pick and choose. Whenever they can limit somebody's liberty by using it, that's kind of when the political left wants to do it. And I want to go back to some of these good things. I was in Austin, July of 2013, when the state legislature, I think Phil King was part of that then, passed the 20-week bill. It was overturned by the courts. I went down there. I was in the Senate chambers when they announced it with all 5 of my kids. And it was a brutal fight back then, but we have to stay in these battles, because if even when things look dark, don't give up. Don't give up, because you can win on another day. And so that's what we're seeing here tomorrow with the pro-life in Texas. If you stay in the battle, sometimes it's difficult, but victory can come.
Yeah, Americans don't elect people to rule us or to lead us. We elect people to serve us. And that's what Representative King does. Thank you, sir, for doing that very thing. I want to thank you for being with us. John Graves also for being with us today.